So they say that we never see something coming from nothing in our daily experience. And they ask, well, how then can you say that the universe could come from nothing? And so this is a quagmire in some form or the other. But in a short form, how would you break it down so that our audience can pick up to formulate a response should someone present it to them?
Yeah, that is interesting. So, I mean, you can listen to that argument and you can kind of sense that something is wrong with it. But yeah, it's actually true. So if I take any object around me, it is made of some pre-existing stuff. So just take the example that you said of the axe. So the wood and the metal, they are arranged in one particular fashion, and that's how you have the axe. So this particular objection is basically attacking the first premise, right? Especially the words begin to exist, right? Anything that begins to exist has a cause. And philosophers like William Craig and others generally give an inductive argument to arrive at the first premise. And there are multiple lines of arguments that are given. Maybe we can dwell on some of those going forward. But one of the arguments is this inductive argument where, what we see around or, within the universe, all of the entities that we're talking about, which began to exist, have a cause for their existence. So the skeptic can then take a step back and say that, well, but nothing begins to exist, right? The axe did not begin to exist. Or I'm a fan of cricket, right? So we know the cricket bat. So if I just point to a cricket bat, I don't say it's a willow plank, right? Although it's from the English willow or the Kashmiri willow, the bat is created, but we know it's a cricket bat, right? So at some point, that particular, whatever was the pre-existing stuff was relabeled to be a cricket bat. So that is the key objection here. And in philosophy, it's called mereological nihilism, the view that there are no composite whole entities, and every entity is merely a rearrangement of some pre-existing entities or stuff. So this particular view, as per this particular view, nothing is caused into existence. So what is happening here? Firstly, even if we subscribe to such a view that nothing really begins to exist and everything is a mere arrangement of stuff, notice that at least at the fundamental level, because we started by talking about quantum mechanics, the virtual particles, the most fundamental simples, as even atheist philosophers would call it, they are still left to be explained. Those entities have begun to exist. Now, at this point, I think when you think more about it, it actually spills over the implication of this view also has to do with the second premise when we say that the universe began to exist. So someone who is a mereological nihilist would have to redefine the universe to mean these fundamental virtual particles which alone began to exist. Everything is then a rearrangement of these particles, and and you have such a progression. So at least you have these fundamental particles to explain. So it's just you're still redefining universe, but the universe still has the universe still begins to exist and still requires a causal explanation for its existence. That's number one. Number two, I think from our own experience, we can actually rebut this particular view, which is rather extreme. Just think about it. Nothing really exists. Everything is just rearrangement of pre-existing stuff. Then you, Jacob, you're all, we never began to exist, right? I began to exist, I believe, in 1996. When I say I believe, I know that I began to exist in 1996. So can I say that, well, before I began to exist, I existed? That's a logical contradiction in terms. So once you take the wheel of this argument and start, and just to evade the Kalam Cosmological Argument, one can use it, but when you apply in theory, in practice, it does not really make sense. And I would strongly refer people who are watching this to the conversation that Dr. William Lane Craig had with Cosmic Skeptic. And I think, if I remember correctly, Dr. Craig, when Alex raises this particular view, Dr. Craig pauses, and with a smile on his face, he says that, well, this, as if, this is the gotcha moment. He says, right, this is the high intellectual price tag of atheism. It's a fascinating conversation. So it's an extreme view, Jacob. And so all in all, our own experience would nullify that particular view. Plus, even if you take that everything is a rearrangement of a pre-existing matter, you still have to explain at least few fundamental simples as well as your own existence, which at some point began to exist.
Yeah, and on that similar note, when the Kalam Cosmological, the premise one says that everything that began to exist has a cause. And so even if you say that it is just rearrangement stuff, you have to consider the fact that there is some cause rearranging something. And some people take the premise one and then immediately go at and say, oh, you cannot say creatio ex nihilo, you can't say creation out of nothing. What I would say is that the creation out of nothing comes once you sit and evaluate, okay, if this is the universe, what do we mean by the universe? What is comprising the universe? And then we realize, oh, when we say the universe began to exist, matter and space and time began to exist for the very first instance. Then we realize, well, then it should come out of sheer nothing. They couldn't be pre-existing matter because matter began to exist with the universe. So I think they combine their objection to the creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, with this and say it's just rearrangement of matter. So there is different, in addition to the key objections, the high hardcore philosophical ones that you mentioned with mereological nihilism and as such, there are more to be connected with.